Hey, y'all, I'm Melissa Guerra. I am the Kitchen Wrangler, and this is my podcast. This is podcast number 2. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button. And it feels kind of cheesy and tacky to tell you to subscribe to my channel. But, marketing works because last week I had 3 followers, and now I have 16. So that's 433% improvement in my numbers. So that's pretty cool. So I hope I have like the same uptick again this week. I don't really know. But anyway, make sure you hit that subscribe button because this is where all the fun is on my podcast. So I do hope that you tune in. Another thing I wanted to say is I am so incredibly hot. And I don't mean that in a Paris Hilton sort of way. It's just where I am doing this podcast is in the closet. I'm in the closet of a bathroom and there is no air circulation. So anyway, if I start looking kind of glowy, it's because there's no air conditioning. So anyway, I'm trying to keep my train of thought too, because it is just so flipping hot in here. Not me. I'm not hot. Well, I'm hot. Well, okay. You get it. And yes, with my low tech way of presenting, I do have a piece of paper in front of me because I can't figure out how to run this slideshow and read from a script at the same time. So y'all are just going to have to deal. But this week we are talking about rice. And I know that is an incredibly broad subject, but it also gives me the opportunity to explain to you a little bit more about the way that I see food history. Now, if y'all tuned in, well, 3 of y'all tuned in last week to see my podcast, and I was talking about living here on the Texas border. So I get to see food in a very different light here in the United States than what the rest of the nation gets to see. So all of these different ingredients help me tell the story of the morphing of cuisines across our continent. And Tex Mex, that is my turf. But the subject matter does kind of broadcast out into the bigger world. And if you didn't catch last week's podcast, because, okay, what's the math on that? 13 of you did not. Go check it out. I talked about lettuce, which is an incredibly sexy, very sexy subject. I know lettuce doesn't sound sexy. It really is. As this podcast rolls along, you will get to understand that I am a real prude. I'm a real square, not this, but like this, I am a square. So I didn't want y'all to think that I was some sort of weird pervert woman sitting in the closet of a bathroom talking to you all about lettuce and sex. So I put a lot of explanatory links in the comments below podcast number 1. So check it out. And some of these links are kind of nerdy. So if you are having trouble sleeping, then you can tune into podcast number 1. It'll put you right out. If your mind is, buzzing with all the thoughts of the day, you will absolutely experience hive collapse. When you read these articles, you'll be out and you'll enjoy your sleep. So let's get to talking about rice. And like I said, it is very global. It is not as sexy as lettuce, but it's incredibly important. I mean, rice is one of those grains that the world cannot live without. But let me get to my little slideshow. And again, with me and my inability with technology. All right, y'all hold on. Let's see how this goes. Bam, rice. Oh, and that's my photo. Yay, me. So rice. Now there is a scientific name for rice. You may not think that rice is very scientific. I just said it's not sexy, but it is scientific. And that is Oryza sativa. Oryza sativa. And whenever you hear that word sativa, and I'll spell it out in the future slides, but I can't figure out how to talk and chew gum at the same time. Anyway, it is coming up. That word is coming up, sativa. Anytime you hear the word sativa, when I start talking about scientific words, those are plants that are cultivated. Not every plant is cultivated. Not every plant is intentionally planted, watered, and then harvested. And the prime example of that is my front yard. Now, we planted St. Augustine grass. The yard is about 50% St. Augustine grass. The rest of it is weeds. Now, we did not intentionally plant those weeds, but they are wild plants that came up because they felt like it. They just came up on their own. Now, some of these weeds, though, They are native plants. They are from South Texas. So something like mala mujer, which is bull nettle, oh, goodness gracious, what is happening to my slideshow? Hold on, let me get back. Okay, I hope that didn't flip. Okay, I don't know. Computer's doing weird stuff. So like I said, my front yard is half St. Augustine, half weeds. And out of those weeds, some of them are native plants and some of them came from elsewhere. So we have a bull nettle that is called mala mujer. That is absolutely native. It is from South Texas. And then we have other stuff like verdolaga, which is purslane, and that is actually from Europe. So that is an invader species. So anyway, even though we intentionally planted the front yard, not everything went to plan and wild plants came up. So there's a difference. There are cultivated plants and then there are wild plants. So the cultivated one, I don't know if St. Augustine would be considered sativa, but the intention with the St. Augustine was that we would plant it so we had a nice yard. Here we are. Now, at one time, though, rice, because rice is a plant, as y'all know, it's not an animal, it's not a gas. Rice, at one point, was a wild plant. It was not sativa. It was a wild plant, and it was a grass that grew. Okay, let's see if I can do this, y'all. Wait a minute. I'm going to try to, move a slide here. Oh, that's another one of rice and me. Sorry about that. Rice. Okay, yeah, just in case y'all didn't know what rice is, this is rice. And this is a woman, I think it's a woman. This is someone that is planting rice because rice has to grow in marshy, wet areas. And when rice was wild, before it was cultivated, like this person is cultivating rice right here, it would grow on the side of the rivers. Rice is the head of a grass, like a little seed pod that grows on the head of a grass stem that grows near a river. And because rice needs to grow in a marshy, wet area, once the rice is sprouted, then it has to be planted in a rice paddy or marsh that has about 2 to 4 inches of water. And so you can imagine in your mind, I'm sure you're already picturing, yeah, I can see how rice would have been wild at one point because there's a lot of different grasses that grow on the sides of the river. And so way back when hunter-gatherers would go out, they probably noticed a deer or a bird eating I'm starting to sweat. This is, it's only April right now. And as we get towards July, I'm just going to melt like a big snow woman here in this bathroom closet. But anyway, that's my problem, not yours. Anyway, thank goodness this is a podcast and y'all can't really see me sweating all that much. Anywho, where was I? Well, let me just start again. So you can imagine that hunter-gatherers would have watched animals and they would have seen birds or deers eating the heads of these grasses. And, the conversion of humans from hunter-gatherers into farmers, what that meant for humankind is I don't have to hunt anymore. Have y'all ever hunted? It is a lot of work. It's a lot of work, especially if you don't have a gun or a truck or anything mechanical that'll take you there. You're on foot, you've got bows, you've got arrows, you have spears, you have traps. It is very difficult. And it's very challenging to stay alive if you are a hunter because you may not find any food. But farming assured humans that they could survive, and more importantly, that their babies would survive. So that is how farming happened. All right, so let's go on. But let's talk about where did this wild rice come from? And there are there are different theories. And, we may think that scientists are boring people. And if y'all are scientists, I'm just going to apologize. I'm going to rat y'all out right here, right now. Maybe they are a little boring, but, they're looking for, some scientists are looking for the absolute origins of different ingredients, different plants, different animals, different techniques. You're looking for the origins. Now, why would a scientist get all hung up on the origins of a plant or an animal? Well, because when you find where those plants or animals came from, then those are the people that get to take credit for those ingredients. So if you find that cattle came from Africa or that they came from Vietnam, then those are the people that developed that plant or that animal. Well, cattle is an animal. They developed that for farming and ranching. And so those are the people that get to take credit. And so it's really important to know how humans moved around the world and how they took their food with them and who actually gets the credit for having developed these ingredients. For me, I think it's absolutely fascinating. So going back to rice, there are two places that are considered the potential origin of rice. And one would be, let's see if I can show you. Can I expand this? Dagnabbit, I cannot expand this. All right, y'all are just going to have to squint. Is that technical? That's not technical, but anyway, it works. Squinting works. So there's two rivers in Asia where potentially rice originated. So it could either be the Yangtze River along the banks of the Yangtze River in China or along the river Ganges. Now, both of these are incredibly important, not only culturally, but geographically in Asia. And so much culture came from near where the rice originated. So you can tell that the rice was incredibly important in helping the culture of China and India develop. And they developed potentially on the banks of these two incredibly important rivers. So anyway, that's a very, very high overview of where the origins of rice came from. Now let's look at these little wild rices, because y'all are probably thinking, all right, I've got something else to say. If I'm saying wild rice and you're thinking, there's wild rice in Michigan, I totally hear you. But just hang on to that because we'll get to it. We're not talking about the wild rice that you get from Michigan. We're talking about rice that comes from Asia. That's the only type of rice we're talking about. But anyway, like I said, just hold that thought. I'm going to get to y'all. Right. What do we have next? Okay. So this is, why did I put this map of the world in here? Well, I think I wanted you to see that Asia is in the east and the Americas are in the west. So rice, the Rhiza sativa, would not have been in the Americas before Columbus started sailing around the world. It would have remained near China, near India, and in that part of the world. Before Columbus, before the Vikings, before people started transversing the ocean, Rhiza sativa would have stayed in Asia. And then that wild rice that I was not supposed to mention, but I sort of mentioned, that would have stayed in the Americas. They would not have met each other at any point. They're similar plants, but they're very, very different foods, very, very different ingredients, very, very different, because they come from different places. So this, my friends, is Oryza nivara. This is one of the original primordial rice. What's the plural of rice? Rices? Reese? All right. Anyway, I don't know. This is Oryza rufipogon, which is a perennial. Now, this is a wild rice. Can you tell me, can you see something? If you were a hunter-gatherer, what would be the first thing that you would cultivate out of that daggum little piece of rice? I would get those hairs out of there. I would come up with a rice that was hairless, because that has got to be a problem. If you swallow one of those things, Lord have mercy, that is going to tickle. Or it could scratch your hands, or it could just be problematic in terms of processing the rice. So the wild rices were improved. Is that a good word? I think improved is a good word. So the first thing I would have done is improve those daggum little hairs right on out of there, right on out of that wild rice. Here's another one. This is Oryza officinalis. Again, that looks kind of hairy, but it's kind of hard to tell. It does not looks like it's got a hard outer coating. So again, they would have collected this rice, and I probably improved the outer hull to have gotten it off. Here's another one. And this is Oryza minuta. Where is this one from? Well, this is from Asia, obviously. But if you can see that little white line is giving you a scale. But look at those. They look kind of flat and wide. It's a very different type of rice. But again, primordial rice. And then we've got one last one. And this one is from the Philippines. I think this photo is really interesting because you can see the one that is labeled, is it Puerto Ricia Coartata? Again, because I live in my head, I never know how these words are pronounced. Like I can say things like mala mujer because that's a weed in my yard. I cannot say Puerto Ricia Coartada, but I know that's what it is. Anyway, enough of that. That wild rice is from the Philippines, and on the other side is our little buddy, Oryza sativa. So in the middle is their baby. It's their little hybrid that is a cross between the Puerto Ricia Coartada and Oryza sativa, the cultivated rice. So why would you want to put a wild rice together with a cultivated rice? Well, possibly to improve some aspect of the rice that your Oryza sativa. Maybe you want rice to grow at a certain altitude. Maybe you want rice to grow in a drought. These are things that you can engineer by cross-pollination, by hybridizing, by making new cultivars. And there's thousands and thousands of cultivars of rice now, and they all came from a wild rice. So I'm going to address this about and let me be really clear. This is not a complete list at all. Again, the point of my podcast is that y'all don't fall asleep, even though most of y'all probably asleep already, all 16 of you. But this is a very, very high overview of rice. You have to understand that there have been thousands, tens of thousands of farmers and scientists through humans' history that has been manipulating and changing rice into the rice that we know of today. So there's way more than I could ever say in a 20-minute podcast about rice. But I do want you to understand that these wild rices, that these wild plants are the origin of every plant that you eat. Now, what you're seeing on the screen right here, that is called Zizania texanus, and that is a Texas wild rice. I know y'all Michigan folks, if there is one out of the 16 of you, if there's someone from Michigan, we have our own wild rice here in Texas, and it only grows on the banks of the San Marcos River, which I pass every time I'm on my way to Austin. But you can see it's growing on the side of a river, and it is a seed head. Now that is a wild rice. It has not been cultivated. Some people might think that it's a little bit weedy. If they're cleaning out around their river house, they may pull it up, but that is a very rare wild rice that grows here in Texas. It would have been very important to indigenous tribes that were looking for food, or animals that were looking for food, or birds. So anyway, wild rices exist around the world, but the majority of cultivated rice came from Asia, and they are the ones that should receive credit for rice around the world. Which I guess the reason I got off on this tangent with rice is because I do think a lot about Tex Mex cuisine, because that is where I live. And if you've ever been to a Mexican Tex Mex restaurant, when you are served a plate, there is rice on it. And I do think people forget how much credit we should give to the farmers and the scientists of Asia, how much they've contributed to our local border cuisine. So anyway, my very long roundabout story. I'm always super grateful to receive the gifts from the world, from other people that have spent time improving plants, improving ingredients, so I can be the beneficiary. So super grateful for that. I'm checking my little low-tech paper to see if I missed anything. I think I got it all. Oh, I think the final thing I wanted to say is when you find the origins of where a plant or animal protein ingredient is from, it is a gift. It is a gift that is on our plate. And like I said, for that, I am forever grateful. So there you go. There is my podcast for, let's see. Oh, I did it. Okay. So that is my podcast for today. This is podcast number 2. And yeah, make sure you subscribe and also go check out my Kitchen Wrangler channel where I'm cooking for you. It's all a lot of fun. And I'm always so glad that you get to join me here at the ranch. I'm always glad that you listen to me. I can tell you nobody here at the ranch listens to me. So it's always a pleasure to talk to you. I hope you're listening to me. If you're still awake, y'all wake up and send this podcast to your friends so that they all subscribe. And yeah, you know what? This podcast should make you feel better about yourself because I'm really struggling with all of the technology, but I get through it. So don't forget, follow both of my YouTube channels, my podcast here and my cooking channel on YouTube. I'm Melissa Guerra. I'm the Kitchen Wrangler, and I'm looking forward to seeing you here at the ranch again soon. Bye now.